Oops. All right, now I lost everybody's picture. There we go, we're back. Okay, and I think we're recording. Let me double check that. Yep, looks like we're going. Okay. All right, so welcome everyone. Let me share my screen and we can get things kind of going tonight. So I want to start off with the two short lectures that I have. They're both, one is the current lecture from your textbook, which we're going to look at first, that talks about probable cause affidavits, which we're talking about search warrants this week. And then we'll go into a second short lecture that just talks about a little bit more about the investigative side of search warrants, so you can kind of see the whole side of it, because I want you to be able to understand all of it as we kind of go through this and discuss it. And then we'll wrap up with talking about this week's writing assignment, which is going to be writing parts of a search warrant, not the whole thing, so don't panic, but just very specific parts to give you kind of an understanding on what that looks like and what it feels like. Also, just really quick, I forgot to open it, and I think I sent out a reminder about it. At least I believe I did, and if I didn't, tell me. But there is what we call a course assessment that we do for classes, typically every other year sometimes. And what we do is we give a very short quiz. It's not graded, but I'll give you extra credit if you do it. Matter of fact, I'll give you 15 points of extra credit if you do it, but I need you to try to do your best. Don't just go through there and click all the answers and they're all wrong. Do your best to get as many correct as you can. And basically what it does is it shows the instructors, it hits certain things that we believe are important to teach you. And if the majority of the class gets that question wrong, then maybe we as instructors aren't hitting that topic correctly. So it kind of helps us a little bit. So do me a favor, and do yourself a favor if you want 15 extra credit points. Take the course assessment. It's open right now. I did open it, and it's open through the end of the week, and I'll extend it a little bit if I need to. But it's an easy way to grab some extra points, and it helps me kind of go back through and figure out what we need to change maybe in the way the class works. So with that being said, let's start off with our Chapter 13 lecture, again talking about search warrants and probable cause. And what I hope to kind of get you to learn is to understand the difference between a probable cause affidavit and an arrest warrant, because there are a couple of different things. And then to be able to understand and identify the contents of what a probable cause affidavit looks like, an arrest warrant, and a search warrant. They're all three different. They all have a level of probable cause that has to be shown, and that's where your writing skill comes in, to be able to document probable cause. We've talked about this before, so we know what probable cause is. But you have to be able to write it enough to where a judge will issue this warrant. Because as we've kind of learned, and hopefully we've learned, at least I think we have, in order to make an arrest or to search somebody, you're going to have that level of probable cause. So if you're going to write a search warrant, you still have to have that. And in order to get it signed, you take it to a judge. They read your search warrant affidavit of probable cause and all the other things that go with it. And then that third-party judge decides, hey, yeah, you have enough for this warrant, or no, you don't. And so that's why the writing part is really important. And then we want to be able to understand the importance of identifying the property that you need to search for during a search warrant, because you're going to have to tell the judge, the court, what you're searching for. And you're going to have to be very specific. And we'll learn a little bit more about that on the second short lecture. So with that being said, we know that, or we should know that the Fourth Amendment kind of is the umbrella when it comes to probable cause and searching, whether it's searching in the field, searching a person in the field, searching a car, searching somebody's handbag, a backpack, or their house. it all falls underneath the Fourth Amendment, even searching of a cell phone, and we'll learn a little bit about that. And we know what it says, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, because it tells us all this. Houses, papers, effects against not all searches, but those are deemed unreasonable. And seizures, which means not just searching, but taking the property, actually seizing it. And it continues on and says, shall not be violated. And no warrants, which is what we're talking about tonight, so no search warrant, arrest warrant, etc., shall issue but upon probable cause. But then it goes on to say, supported by oath or affirmation, meaning you swearing, and what you're writing is going to be true. So that's why, if you've ever wondered why, if you've ever gone and testified in court, or you've ever watched a TV show where somebody gets up, let's say a witness, and they get up there and the clerk says, raise your right hand, and they do this, and they say, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? And you say, yes, I do. The reason for that, that's the oath or affirmation of that witness swearing that what they're about to tell you is true. And if you lie, it's considered perjury, which is a felony, and you can be held accountable. The same thing happens for a search warrant. When you bring that warrant into the judge's chamber and you show it to them and they read it, they're going to do the same thing, but in a closed room, like in the judge's chambers. He'll tell you, raise your right hand, and he'll recite that same thing, and you say, I do, which means you're swearing that what's in that report is true. So again, that kind of goes back to the importance of, your writing skill and making sure that you're accurate. And then finally, it finishes up describing the place to be searched and the persons to be seized. So if you're going to serve a search warrant, arrest warrant, you need to, describe not only what you're looking for and the reason you're looking for it, but also the place that you're actually going to search, or any people that might be there, or even any vehicles. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So, as we talk about the Fourth Amendment, it doesn't specifically state that the warrant shall be issued by a judge, but it's kind of inferred. And we'll talk a little bit more about the reasons why warrants need to be issued by judges. So the Fourth Amendment, again, basically states that the burden of proof, again, is that probable cause, supported by the police officer's oath or affirmation, okay, which specifically describes that place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. So search warrants are issued by a judge or a magistrate who has to determine if that probable cause exists. And if it doesn't, they'll tell you, hey, you don't have enough. Sorry, Fernando, you don't have enough in your search warrant. You got to go get more info, and then put it, build up your search warrant a little bit with more PC, and then bring it back. It doesn't mean that they're never going to sign it. It just means that you need more. So that does happen every once in a while. Not often, but every once in a while. And the rationale for having a neutral or impartial party, which would be a judge, to review the facts of the case, to determine if the issuance of a warrant is appropriate and proper. The rationale for that third party is because you're invested. If you just wrote the search warrant and said, hey, this is cool, I'm good, this is the best warrant ever, we're going to go out there and hook and book and arrest everybody and all that stuff, well, you're kind of biased because it's your own warrant. So the courts have really kind of, under that Fourth Amendment, that third party, that neutral party, they think is a better way to have somebody review your probable cause in a search warrant. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. And we'll learn a little bit more about that on the investigative side. So again, the information contained in that affidavit, and I'll show you what an affidavit looks like. That's how you kind of lay everything out. Supporting a search warrant has to provide a comprehensive and thorough documentation of the facts of what happened, that incident. And again, all those facts have to add up to meet that burden of probable cause. And we've talked about the difference between the different burdens of proof. I put in kind of a little thing for you to look at here. We know reasonable suspicion is basically, well, it kind of tells you right here. when you look here. It's where you have a level of articulable facts, meaning that you can write or articulate that you believe some type of illegal activity is taking place. That's reasonable suspicion. So you can stop someone, you can detain them, and investigate that particular incident. That probable cause is kind of the next level up. And again, it's more than articulable facts. It's those facts and circumstances that would lead kind of an everyday person to believe that this was actually taking place. And the reason probable cause is higher is because the burden, the infringement by law enforcement is more. Stopping you and investigating you for something is a low level. But if I'm going to search you, that's an infringement on your Fourth Amendment. Further, therefore, they want that higher burden. And then, of course, that proof beyond a reasonable doubt is, what you need in order to convict someone. And that's the highest one, of course. And it needs to be the highest one because people's freedom are at stake. So you can see how these kind of all work together. So the probable cause affidavit, which is kind of what you're going to write in our writing assignment, not the whole big thing, but just a part of it, is a document that contains information about the elements of the crime. You have to show that something's happening. And it can't be a hunch. There's got to be something in there. All right. It's got to show that person, the suspects, their participation in the crime, that people are involved in it, and here's what's happening. And then an explanation by you supporting the reason for an arrest. And I'll show you an actual search warrant in just a couple minutes. So probable cause exists when the facts or circumstances, of a crime are there within your knowledge, the officer's knowledge. Again, that would lead a reasonable person to believe that, the person listed in that affidavit is committing some type of crime. And that affidavit is signed as a signed statement basically by you under penalty of perjury, like I talked about, that asserts that the facts that you have in that affidavit and that suspect's participation in that crime that's listed in your affidavit is true. And a lot of times, warrants are normally completed after an arrest or after a crime has been committed. So if you have, let's say you catch a robbery suspect in the field, they might have more, they may have done other robberies or have other instrumentalities of crime, etc., at their house. So you might follow up. You've got the suspect arrested, and now you're going to write a search warrant to go back to their house. Same with maybe a homicide suspect. Maybe you're searching for a weapon. Maybe there was a drive-by shooting by gang members, and you know that they've done more than one, and you're looking for other weapons that were involved in other crimes. So a lot of times it's kind of after the fact. Not always, but typically it is. We've done an exercise with this, so you guys know what this looks like. This is a standard probable cause affidavit, and this is after you make an arrest. We've learned that, to where when you take someone to county jail, you fill out this little probable cause form that tells the person at the jail, hey, here are some facts about this case. Okay, so this is kind of the lower level. And in your textbook, it has a listing of a probable cause affidavit and a couple of other ones. So here's kind of a closer picture. Now, an arrest warrant, and now we're going to kind of get into the warrants. An arrest warrant is usually completed, when the person who committed the crime is not in custody. That kind of makes sense, right? You've got a case on this person. He's been identified by a witness. You've got some physical evidence, so you basically have the judge issue an arrest warrant, which means, and again, usually they're not in custody, because that's why you issue the arrest warrant. If a person you are charging with a crime is in custody, then the probable cause affidavit is all that needs to be completed to book them in jail. If they're not in custody, then you're going to have to do that affidavit. And again, I'll show you what one looks like so you don't have to. I think I have a better copy of one. This is a state of California, kind of an arrest warrant. I'll show you a whole one in just a minute. So the arrest warrant, they're very similar to a search warrant. Requirements are similar to a probable cause affidavit, in an arrest warrant. In all three documents, you have to establish, again, that PC to support the charges, as well as the jurisdiction where the search or the or the crime was committed. So you're gonna have to be a little bit more detailed. The search warrant, is usually completed when there's probable cause to believe that something was stolen. So you're looking for something stolen, or someone was used. They committed some type of crime, and you're looking for evidence, or something was used in the commission of a crime, or they possess something that's illegal, and that would be, let's say, narcotics. So you've got information that someone is selling narcotics from their home. So this is typically things that we look for in a search warrant. A couple more. The items that you're looking for would be material evidence in a prosecution, or something that is required, authorized, or permitted by statute. Or is kept, stored, transported, sold, dispensed, possessed in violation of a statute. So again, there's kind of a lot to it. The requirements that a judge will use to make a decision regarding the issuance of a warrant is, has there been a crime committed? And that the person or items to be seized are clearly defined, that the location of where the search warrant is to be conducted is included. So these are things that the judge looks for in your warrant. And I have a better one I'll show you at the end, but here's a copy of an actual search warrant in California. Let me go to the second page. And you can see in here, there's a little place that talks about the place to be searched. And they describe it. And again, I have a PDF one that when we're done, I'll blow it up and you can look at it. But you're going to need to, you can't just put the address. You do need to put the address, but they want a little bit more in your warrant. You have to describe the location to be searched. So they're going to want to know, this one here, it talks about this residence is further described as a single-story family apartment located on the top floor of a 2-story building. It has an off-white stucco exterior with a tile roof. Its east-facing door printed. Why do you think that we have to be so specific? Why can't we just write the address? I want a search warrant for 128 North Willow. Go ahead, Alec.
To prevent any mistakes, any possible search warrants conducted on a residence that wasn't intended to be conducted on.
Yeah, so there have been times, and I have to say I've been involved in a few in my career, where you went to the wrong place. And maybe the address was wrong or whatever, or you're at one apartment and you should be at the other. So they want you to be very specific so you don't kick down grandma's door and go inside there and point guns and yell, get on the ground and all that stuff, looking for narcotics, machine guns, homicide suspects, etc. And it's Auntie Jones that lives there. So yeah, it's for mistakes. And as funny as it sounds, sometimes there are mistakes. So that's why they want you to describe it. So that way they know that you've actually looked at it, you've seen it, and you're describing it in the warrant. So that's a good thing. And then here you can see there's a section for not just location to be searched, but people. A lot of officers will put any and all subjects found inside the residence, but you can also describe each one if you have names. If you have a name, a birthday, a height, weight, you can actually describe that person in here. And then vehicles, the same thing. You can leave it generic, any and all vehicles at this residence, or if you have specific information, you should list it, each vehicle. And that just kind of makes your search warrant look a little bit better. The type of evidence to be seized, so this is a gang search warrant, so we're looking for firearms. So again, this is an actual warrant. So if we're looking for firearms, we want any firearms. And then we want a lot of other things. And when we do the investigative kind of lecture, you'll understand why. But here we're looking for not just firearms, but holsters, ammunition, targets, rental agreements, bill of sales, gang paraphernalia, photographs, drawings, graffiti, newspaper clippings, address or phone books, all this different stuff. And, we want to be specific because that's what the Fourth Amendment tells us, that we need to be specific when we're doing this on the type of evidence, but we're going to be specific for reasons. And again, you'll learn what the reason. Any idea before we get there? Any idea why we have to be so specific as far as evidence goes? Can't we just put guns? Go ahead.
It could be brought up in court if you obtained something that wasn't in the search warrant.
Yeah. So the good part is that, yes, you need to be specific, but if you're lawfully there serving a search warrant and you find other illegal materials, you can seize them. But what they don't want you to do is just go in there on a fishing expedition. So you're right, Alec, in a sense. You don't want to just, I'm looking for, just this, and I'm ripping open every drawer and opening everything, looking for anything I can find. That's more of a general warrant, and those are against the law. You can't do that anymore. A general search warrant. And that was kind of early on in the growing up of search warrants, if you will. So that's why they want you to be specific. And then here's the officer's probable cause. And in here, without going through the whole thing, he talks about that there was a shooting that occurred at this place, and then there was another shooting. So you have the first shooting, the second shooting. So he's documenting what's happened, because he's looking for firearms that are involved in gang activity. And then he goes on to say that he contacted some informants and, talked about some different evidence. And he kind of puts it all together based on all of this stuff that's happening. I want you, Judge, to issue a search warrant for this, this particular place based on what I've told you in this probable cause, document. And that's kind of what a search warrant looks like. So with that being said, some tips for search warrants, and then a lot of this will clear up when we jump real quick into the kind of the investigative piece. But some tips: remember, you as the affiant, the person that's writing the warrant, you have control. With what they call an on-call judge. Judges are on call. Even in the middle of the night, there's a judge in your city that's on call. So in the middle of the night, if you need a warrant, you can call up the judge on call. They're not always happy to be woken up at 1 a.m, but you'll drive out there to their house, or you can even fax it to them, or now you can email it and they can sign it, and email it back to you. So there's different ways you can do it. But that's kind of some important stuff. If the judge finds a flaw in your document, don't fight with the judge. You can give more information to the judge. The judge may ask you some questions. Hey, Tony, what about this in your warrant? I see you're missing this. Can you get this? Don't argue with the judge, because that's just going to make the judge not happy. So it's better to take the feedback from the judge. If they're not going to sign your warrant right away, go back and get the needed information, and then come back to the judge and kind of present your warrant again. And these are all, documents that are official orders of the court. So they do require a certain type of writing. If you're not really sure, especially when you're a new officer, when you write search warrants, you can always, talk to another officer. That's a good thing to do. Remember, these documents require facts, not opinion, typically. Okay. And yeah, you don't want to use these, inferences, in, kind of guesses or hunches in a search warrant. They really are. The judges are going to look for factual information. Okay. So with that said, let me go here. And this is kind of a closer view of the search warrant. And this isn't stuff you write. This is all pre-printed on here. It talks about the date, and here's where the judge is going to sign. In the affidavit, they want to know what you're looking for. Are you looking for stolen or embezzled property or things used to commit a felony, drug sales, firearms, etc.? So they've got a list of stuff here. They also have this interesting line down here. It's night service. So typically between the hours, and it varies on what state you're in, but for the most part, between 7 a.m. in the morning and 10 p.m. at night is the standard time for serving of a search warrant. Okay, unless the judge clicks this night service box right here, which means that you can serve it after 10 or before 7 in the morning. And the reason for a night service would be the person might be armed. Maybe there's a lot of people in there. You want to get into the house and secure it before the person, kind of gets out of bed and gets to the door. There could be some really dangerous situations going on. That would be the rationale for a night service type search warrant. A lot of search warrants that I recall doing, we would do it like 5 in the morning, maybe even 6. But you would have to get a night service endorsement, and you have to tell the judge why. So again, here's kind of a closer look. We talked about places to be searched. This is one thing that you're going to write about, and I'll show you what we're going to do. But it describes the place to be searched because you need to be particular in this requirement. The persons to be searched, the vehicles. Some officers will put any and all, and some will actually put a vehicle in there if they have that information. So it's important to do that. We talked about the evidence to be seized. Here it is a little bit larger than what you were looking at. So again, this is a gang search warrant, and you can see you want to look for and seize anything that can help you establish your case. So if it's a gang shooting, you're going to look for, of course, you want to look for things like graffiti or gang paraphernalia or news clippings or holsters or firearms or anything that can show that the person at that house is affiliated with that particular gang. So that's typically why you see a lot of different things here. And then down at the bottom, you can see kind of unique, all electronic devices, cell phones, because what's in a cell phone? Photos, phone numbers, maybe video, who knows, right? People hanging out together that show that they're hanging out, with different gang members. There's not many pagers anymore, but it's still in there. Any type of electronic storage devices, computers. So in this day of technology, etc., you want to make sure that your warrant has this information in here because there could be good evidence for you there. And then, then again, we talk about this is the officer's probable cause, where he's documenting to the judge, here's all the stuff that happened in these couple of shootings, and I believe that this gang was involved in it based on all of these facts right here. Therefore, I want you to issue a search warrant, Judge. And that's typically exactly what this is. I wonder if I have, let's see, that's a consent to search form. Let me see where the other one is. I brought up another one I thought I wanted to. In your assignment, and just kind of getting off track for a second, when you look in the module, there is this manual. If you really do want to know more about search warrants, I put the 2012 manual in there. This is for the LADA's office, and it covers everything on search warrants. So if you were to look, it's got every single thing you could ever want. So if you're just interested, there it is. And then finally, before we move on to our other quick lecture, here's another kind of format of a search warrant. This one is basically San Bernardino County, same thing. Here's the officer's probable cause. It's just written a little bit different. It's not quite as templated as the other one. But the same thing, description of places to be searched, vehicles to be searched, persons to be searched, property to be seized. This is a drug warrant, so methamphetamine, scales, ledgers, money, anything that has to do with this particular thing is what the officers are looking to seize. So again, you want to put as much in there as possible. Okay, so with that said, let's now look at it from an investigative standpoint. So now what we've already talked about can kind of make sense. So we've already looked at the Fourth Amendment, so we know what that says. So and again, we know that it says no warrant issued without probable cause. There's a couple of case laws you really don't need to know about now, but Mapp versus Ohio is one big one that really set the stage for search warrants, etc. But search warrants, when we talk about the Fourth Amendment's reasonableness clause, okay, It prohibits unreasonable search and seizures. And again, the warrant clause. So there's like two pieces to the Fourth Amendment, okay? There's the search clause and the warrant clause. And the warrant clause basically says, again, no warrant but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation. And it goes on again, as we read, that says that, particularly describing the place to be searched, the persons or things to be seized. Okay, so it wants you to be particular. And historically, as we kind of talked about, the Supreme Court has really expressed a preference for searches to be conducted based on probable cause issued by a magistrate, meaning a judge. They don't want your sergeant to approve your warrant, although they might internally look at it and go, hey, yeah, your warrant's really good, go take it to the judge. But the person that signs it is going to be a judge, because they are supposed to be a independent third party that has no stake in your search warrant. If that makes any sense. I mean, you have a stake in it because it's your case and you want to make the arrest and find the contraband and take the person to justice, etc. But this judge doesn't have a stake in the game as far as your search warrant goes. So that's why the Supreme Court has really expressed that preference. And there's a case that goes with it. You don't have to know the case, but it's in here if, just for future reference. Coolidge versus New Hampshire. It's back in 1971. Basically, that says the question of whether there's probable cause to justify a search is best answered by a neutral and detached party, judge, rather than you, the officer, who's basically involved in this competitive, game of, cat and mouse catching your suspect. So that's the rationale for the third party, why you have to take it to a judge. And really, kind of going further, this case talks about the balance of interest, meaning the need to conduct your search, to investigate your case, which is cool, and seize all the evidence and look good in front of your supervisor and all that other stuff, against the interest of someone's privacy. Because I guarantee you, if you wrote your own warrant, you're going to look at it and go, yeah, that's it, dude. I'm good to go. But the judge might look at it and go, oh man, you're missing a couple things, because they don't have a stake in the game like you do. So that's the reason for that. And again, this is part from a different lecture, but search warrants, arrest warrants are kind of the same, but there's nothing more important than that particularity requirement. It's really important. Again, you have to put the specific address. You can't guess. You have to be exact. And Alec talked about it earlier, because that way, in case you mess up, the judge wants to know that you went to that address, you looked at it, even if you looked at it through binoculars, because you're not going to walk up and get the description. You might look at it from a distance, but still, you need to be specific. And the objects that you're looking for have to be defined in the scope of the search. Now, with that said, if you're looking for guns and you come across 10 pounds of cocaine, you can seize that because you were lawfully there looking for guns. But they still want you to be specific in what you were looking for. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. We've already looked at a warrant, so we don't have to spend a lot of time on that. If you don't know what a warrant is by definition, in essence, it's a court order that a judge will issue that authorizes you, the law enforcement officer, to go out and conduct a search of a person, a location, or a vehicle for evidence of a crime, and to take that evidence, to confiscate any evidence that you find. And this is where we're going to kind of get into the meat of it. So the warrant, it does have different components in it. First would be, we already know, the neutral and detached officer. Again, this is the judge that's going to sign it. Then there's the affidavit portion. This is sworn to that the facts and details are true and support the warrant. This is what you're going to write. Your affidavit is going to lay out your probable cause that's going to make the judge sign your warrant. We already know what a probable cause is. This is, this helps us establish that the crime has been committed and that objects relating to that crime are in a certain place. In the suspect's car, we believe, in their garage, in their house, etc. So that's part of the probable cause. We talked about the property and persons to be searched. Again, the federal rules of evidence basically say that warrants can be issued for evidence of a crime, contraband, fruits of a crime, and other illegally possessed items, property designed or intended for use for committing a crime, or a person to be arrested. So, there's a lot that kind of goes in there. We talked about that particularity requirement, that location. And if the house has a garage, you're going to have to describe that. If it has a shed in the back, you're going to describe that, because you want to describe all the areas that are on that property so you can lawfully search every one. Okay? And just so you know what a general warrant is, early on in the development of search warrants, and this is a long time ago, general warrants were basically issued for anything for any reason, which means I could just go into your house and search for anything. And then if I found something, I could charge you with it. But that's way, way back then. Okay. And we don't have to get into the dates and things like that, but that's important to know. We've already looked at these, so we already kind of know what a search warrant looks like. This is the same one. A couple things to keep in mind with a search warrant, just so you know. You have to serve your search warrant within 10 days. Now, that may vary from state to state. California, you have 10 days to serve it. After that, it's considered what we call stale, which means that you have to go back and refresh your warrant with new information. Because it doesn't seem, you got to think about it like this. If I get a search warrant and I wait 30 days to serve it, could the person have moved? Could the activity at that house have stopped? Could the evidence have been moved? So it's not really prudent to wait that long. So the courts have basically said, hey, after 10 days, your warrant is stale, so you have to refresh it. So you got to serve it. And then we talked about the time of day. Okay, so typically between 7 and 10 is the average time of service for a search warrant, 7 a.m., 10 p.m. If you want to serve it after 10 or before 7, you need to get that night service endorsement, and you have to specify to the judge why you want that. And all warrants, they have that little thing down here that talk about night service. So you have to establish to the judge, hey, I need it because of safety or whatever. The scope of the search, when you talk about a search warrant, the area that may be searched is going to be defined by the objects. So this is kind of an interesting thing. So if you're lawfully there and you find something illegal, even though it's not listed in your search warrant, you can take it. But there's a little bit of a caveat, and here's the picture that shows it. So let's say that we're looking for something larger, like AR-15s. Let's just throw it out there. We're looking for a bunch of AR-15s that were used in a drive-by shooting. This case that we looked at, U.S. versus Ross, talks about if you're looking for AR-15s or, different types of property, the size of the object, the type of object, will dictate where you can search. So if I'm looking for an AR-15, and this is just, you can ignore this, right? The little mace search, whatever. But can an AR-15 fit in this basket? Little laundry basket? Probably not. So chances are you may not be able to search there because it's out of the scope as the object. It may not even fit in the, well, it might fit in the dryer, but it may not fit, it's not going to fit in these little boxes. But could it fit in here? The answer would be yeah. So does that kind of make sense? So if you're looking for super small items, so let's say a bill of sale for the AR-15, now could you look everywhere? The answer would be yes. So remember how specific the officer was by listing, paperwork, all that stuff? That means you can search in more locations. Does that kind of make sense? So when you're looking for smaller objects, that's going to expand the scope of your search. If you're looking for, 55-inch big screen TVs, they're not going to be in this basket. Okay, so the court says, well, you really shouldn't be looking in there because you're not going to find it. But if you're looking for, phone books or, other things like that related to people involved in the crime, etc., then sure, you could look in there. So hopefully that kind of makes a little bit of sense. Electronic surveillance is kind of the same. You still have to have probable cause to look in somebody's phone if you want to get a search warrant, etc., like that. So a judge can issue warrant for wiretapping, which is listening in, eavesdropping, electronic surveillance. In order to do that, you still would do a search warrant, and you would take it to a judge, and you would still have to establish probable cause. Okay. Let's see. We talked about cell phones. Not a whole lot of stuff. The only other thing to kind of know about search warrants would be what they call the knock and announce. Way back in the English court, or the English court actually qualified the knock and announce rule that held if a homeowner refuses to open their door to the king's representative, be it the tax collector, etc., the sheriff would be entitled to kind of break down the door. That's similar, that this is kind of carried over to current times. So if someone's inside of a residence, we do have to give a knock notice, but if they refuse to open the door, we can force the door open. So that's kind of carried over from common law. And there's a couple of cases that you really don't need to really know. But the reason for the knock and talk, there's three big things. One would be self-defense against intruders. If you arbitrarily kicked open the door without knock and talk or any type of advisal, somebody might think that you're a criminal breaking in, right? So it makes sense. So they might shoot at you to defend their castle. Okay. Privacy, to avoid embarrassment. If you're in the shower or in the bathtub, you happen to be walking around the house naked, whatever it is, they don't want you just barging in without some type of announcement. So hopefully this kind of makes sense. And then destruction of property. So a lot of times, again, people will typically open the door to avoid damage to their home, not all the time. Now, on the other side, there are exceptions to knock notice. And knock notice sounds pretty much something like the officers will bang on the door really hard so people can hear it, and they have to announce who they are, what agency they're with, and what they're doing. So it could be bang, bang, bang on the door, Rialto Police Department, we have a search warrant, demand entry. That could really be it, but it needs to be loud so people can hear it. And then you have to wait what they call a reasonable amount of time. They really don't put a time on it, but it's probably more than 2 seconds. You have to wait, where somebody could actually walk from a back room to the front room. If you get no response, then you can force entry into the location, unless there's threat of harm. So if you were basically, these are exceptions to knock notice. So if there's a prison escapee, you can get that knock notice thing waived. If there's threat of harm, you can get it waived, or destruction of evidence. So if you start to bang on, or you're approaching the door and you start to bang on the door and you hear the toilet flushing and you're doing a narcotics raid, pretty much you don't have to wait because, somebody might be destroying evidence. Or if you hear the racking of a firearm, like a shotgun rack, if you know what that sounds like, or people running or glass breaking or any of those things. So, these are just some other situations. The police are not required to knock and announce if they gain entry through misrepresentation. So this is kind of like, one of those kind of gray areas. So if you dress up as the pizza guy and you go to the door and you knock on the door and you go, pizza man, and they come to the door and open it, you don't have to knock and announce. So this is one kind of exception to the rule. It's kind of interesting how they do that. Again, here's another case. This is talking about how long the police have to wait before breaking down a door. Again, what they call reasonable amount of time. It kind of depends on the size of the location. If it's a one-room apartment, you don't have to wait that long. If it's a 5-bedroom, two-story build, maybe you have to wait a little bit longer. But it really depends on the situation. So just kind of a lot of information. And then there's a little legal equation if you want to know more, and this is going to kind of wrap us up for this. It talks about knock and announce, about how you have to announce your presence, that you're executing the warrant. If you're not going to knock, here's what has to be there. The time to wait before forcing entry, it kind of varies. And the time required to, for someone to destroy evidence, that depends on the nature of the evidence. So these are just a couple of interesting dynamics as we kind of look at that. All right, so that kind of we've looked at two different aspects of kind of search warrants. We looked at the investigative side, and we've also looked at kind of the report writing side. So now I want to go to our weekly assignment. So basically what I want you to do, and it's not going to be on a search warrant form, it can be on just a regular Word doc. Okay, so it can be, I put the manual in here if you need it. Basically, I want you to make 4 headings on the paper. And it doesn't have to be anything formal, but it's going to be description of location to be searched, suspects to be searched, probable cause affidavit, and evidence to be seized. And in your affidavit, which I've attached here, you're going to basically fill in the areas below those headings. I've given you some pictures, so I want you to describe the location to be searched. And there's a little outbuilding. So in your warrant, so this in the affidavit, I'll show you what it looks like. This is the front of the house. This is kind of an angle shot. This is the side of the house. You can see the outbuilding, so you're going to want to put that in your description of place to be searched, right? And then if we go to the affidavit part, which is here, here's your information that you're going to write in your affidavit. Now, what I want you to do, this is basically an informational sheet. So I want you to take the information off here, put it into your own words as an affidavit, okay? And basically, it's an individual who lives next door to a suspected drug dealer. So this gentleman here basically calls the police to report some suspicious activity at this address. And he's talked about how this person next door has lived in this place next to him for about 6 months. And when they first moved in, the neighbors went over to introduce themselves, but they were very kind of withdrawn. The guy wouldn't let him in the house. And basically, they don't come out of their house very often. They're kind of secluded inside of their home, if you will. And when they are outside, they don't talk to anybody. Now, that may not seem like a lot, but as we start to lead into the more facts, you'll see. The neighbor noticed that this gentleman has also installed security cameras and has also recently purchased 3 large pit bull dogs. He can hear the dogs barking and he can see the dogs every once in a while. And then he notices that cars keep coming to this address all the time, day and night. A lot of visitors, but they don't stay very long. And then he started to, this person here, the neighbor, started paying attention to the types of vehicles. And he noticed that a lot of them are motorcycles. All right. Then he starts to see, this is the neighbor, he starts seeing a lot of garbage around the house, including empty Sudafed packages. And if you don't know, I'll kind of give you a hint. Sudafed is used in the making of methamphetamine, as well as masks and gloves. A lot of rags with solvent smell on it. And then he noticed that there's a smell of ammonia that comes from the house quite often. And there's patches of grass where it's kind of, the grass is burnt. Okay. And then he describes the person. So he describes the suspect, both the man and the woman and the vehicles that they're driving. Okay. So when he calls the police and tells them all this, the law enforcement agency conducts an investigation, and they end up with an informant. So you have a statement from an informant, okay? And the informant basically corroborates what that neighbor is seeing and gives you more information about the fact that this person is a member of a motorcycle gang and that he deals in methamphetamine, etc., and give you some really detailed facts. And then here's just information on a criminal records check, etc. So this is all the information. And again, this isn't going to be some 10-page report, okay? It's an affidavit that you're going to be able to write up and convince me that you have probable cause to get a search warrant for this house. You're going to describe the house, and you're going to describe the type of evidence that you're looking for. And when you do that, think outside the box. Not just methamphetamine, but you want to look for, what else would you look for besides methamphetamine if you're going to serve a drug search warrant on somebody that's manufacturing methamphetamine?
The chemicals that were used.
Chemicals. Okay, what else? Besides finished product methamphetamine.
Guns and ammunition.
Guns and ammo, because where there's guns, there's drugs. Where there's drugs, there's guns. So that's good. What else?
Like the cooking material, whatever you call it.
Yep. You could, I mean, not just the containers that it's in, like the glassware, the beakers, stuff like that, but the actual stuff, whether it's acetone, battery acid, pool acid, I mean, all that stuff that makes methamphetamine. Okay, you don't have to list everything, but this is how you start to think about, the more stuff. And there's one other thing. What about like payo sheets? Meaning like, Johnny Jones, $50, meaning that so I'm keeping a ledger. And that could be small. So if that's small, it could be anywhere. So you could search a lot of places. How about money, cash? All of these different things that you're going to want to put in your search warrant, even their cell phone. Are they going to make calls and do deals and take pictures and do all that other kind of? You bet they are. So that would be under evidence to be seized. So, take your time. Everything you need is in here. Okay. You can look in that DA manual if you want, but I really don't think you'll need to. Again, you can just go back to the, what we were looking at with these particular 4 headings. Describe the location, okay? The people to be searched, okay? Your affidavit, this is you telling me your probable cause to search. So you're going to spell out what's, basically you're going to kind of rework and reword this little affidavit doc, right? And list the information that was provided to you by the neighbor and by the informant, okay? And then the property or the evidence to be seized, and that's it. So that's what we're going to do, and that's what you're going to do, and it can be all on one Word doc. It doesn't have to be on separate documents or whatever. So however many pages it ends up being is what it is. Any questions on that? Everybody thinks they got it pretty much handled? Well, you guys are pretty easy then. All right, well, let me get out of the share mode then. And again, you can be as crazy with it if you want, or however. You can make it look formal if you want. If you want to add some flair, hey, you can do that. If you don't, that's fine. I'm just looking for how you complete those different pieces of the search warrant. And even as an officer, don't think that I'm never going to write a search warrant. I'm a patrol officer. That's not true. Many times you as a line officer are going to stumble onto some, you're going to arrest somebody for possession of narcotics or firearms, and what do a lot of criminals usually do when they get arrested? They tell you, hey, guess what? Guess what, Officer Rangel? If you cut me some slack on this case or you talk to the DA, I'll give you a drug dealer. I'll give you the guy that's supplying me. Because they want to rat someone else out to make their case go away or be less impactful. And it happens all the time. And then when you bring that to the detectives, a lot of time they'll tell you, hey, you want to write the warrant? And yeah, and then you basically, fill in all that information. And again, don't panic. Those warrants, while it looks like there's a lot there, a lot of that's already in there. So, when you looked at the search warrant that I showed you, a lot of that information is already in there. You just fill in some of the information. And there you have it. Even the warrant that I showed you, that gang warrant, it wasn't too long. It was like 6 pages, but it had all that other stuff that the court requires in there that you don't have to put in there. But these are the big pieces. Questions while I take roll by taking pictures of who's in attendance here.
Yeah, I have a question. So, for the assignment for Rebel, for one of the quizzes, for I think it was for the distribution of the either to distribute the sentence on matching, it wouldn't submit my answers.
Okay, I'll go in and take a look at it.
Okay.
I'll try to figure out what was. Anybody else have a hiccup on it yet, or if you've already done it?
It was for I think last week's. Yeah, last Sunday.
Okay. All right, I'll go in there and I'll break into it and take a peek and see what was up with it.
Okay.
So we're getting close to the end of the semester as we move closer. So the next couple of reports, this one is different. It's the search warrant. The following week is going to be domestic violence, so it's going to be a little bit more. And then keep working on your homicide report. By now, you should very much so be thinking in your mind how it probably needs to look and the level of detail that might need to be in there, etc. So just kind of think about that. Don't let things go to the next minute. If you're having a problem or an issue, I have office hours on Wednesday nights, or you can email me. We can Zoom separate. I'll do whatever I can to help you. But if you just don't submit assignments, I can't help you. So that's a little out of my. But if you're having a problem and you want to talk about it and work through it or whatever, I'm here to help. My job is to make you pass this class with flying colors and become great report writers. Again, because we all know how important it is. So with that said, that's going to wrap up our lecture. Again, remember, if you just logged on, maybe in the middle and you didn't hear this, the course assessment for this class is open. It's at the very bottom. I believe if you go to your modules and you go all the way to the bottom, you'll see it's a little 15-question quiz. It's not graded. I will give you extra credit for it, but I need you to do your best at it. It's a 15-question little quiz, and it helps me gauge how we've been teaching certain topics. So again, if you all missed number 6, then that means I didn't do my job in teaching you whatever was in number 6. And I can tweak that and make it better the next time. So it is really important. While it might be 15 extra points for you, it's important for me and future students, so I know that we're getting the information across to you the way that it needs to get across. I think that'll do it. Anything else? Yes, go ahead.
I shared the guide that I use for my reports, just in case someone wants to check it out. I mean, it's like a little cheat sheet, so it's in the chat.
Oh, okay. I will pull that out too, so in case, and then if it's okay with you, can I just send it out in an announcement?
Yeah, it's not mine. It's Sacramento Police Department. So.
Okay. All right. So I will send that little template out or guide out as well, and you can all take a look at that. And if it helps you, great. But again, if you need help, if you're falling behind, if you need some assistance, or you don't understand something, let me know so I can help you work through it. Okay. But if that's it, we are done for tonight. Have a good week, everybody.
You too. Good night.
Okay.
Professor,
Yes.
quick question, please.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, for next semesters or fall, will you still have online classes available, or it's in person?
Oh no, it's only going to be most of the college it's going to be 50% about of all students. I mean, because they don't want everybody on campus at one time, so
Mm-hmm.
it'll be 50% in person and the
Mm-hmm.
remainder online. So there's going to be plenty of online classes.
Okay.
Not just
Yeah,
in AJ, but in every subject there'll be plenty. So yeah, because they're
Mm.
going to do kind of a slow roll back in the fall back on campus.
Yeah, because online classes really works for me.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, no, and some people like them. Some people maybe they don't like them quite as much. It just kind of depends.
Yeah.
But yeah, they'll have plenty of classes online, so don't worry about that.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Good.
All right. If that's it, good night, everybody.